What is happening when you eat a low-calorie, low-fat, high-carb diet? You would like to eat additional and eat higher calorie and higher carb foods. Higher carb foods cause you to crave even additional carbs. What's fascinating is that even before folks gain weight and accumulate tons of these greedy, lazy-making fat cells, they show important metabolic changes as a result of intense higher carb, lower fat diet. These changes in belly fat cells begin the total method of weight gain. Body fat, especially belly fat, isn't simply a bunch of excess baggage storing calories for a later date. Body fat is a complex metabolic tissue that's important in control your appetite, dominate the speed of calorie burning, and control weight. In a clever experiment on a bunch of schoolchildren, scientists tested the results of fat and carbs on eating behavior by giving 6th grade children either cheese wedges or potato chips. The youngsters were told they could eat the maximum amount as they needed. Each teams were equally hungry at the beginning of the study, according to customary hunger measures. Supported the concept that you simply can gain weight if you eat additional fat-rich foods, like cheese, that contain additional calories per gram of food, 9 calories per gram of fat versus 4 calories per gram of carb. The cheese-eating children ought to have consumed additional calories. Eat more calories because fat is additional calorie dense, gain additional weight. Basic math, right? However, it doesn't work that approach within the advanced world of biology. If carbs drive you to eat, the crisp cluster ought to have ingested additional calories. What happened? The youngsters within the crisp cluster ate 3 times as several calories because the children within the cheese group and Children United Nations Agency were already overweight consumed even additional calories. Additional proof that fat cells area unit hungry. When the cheese was combined with vegetables, the youngsters ate even fewer total calories. This was more notable within the Children United Nations Agency were overweight or fat. After we mix foods that area unit high in nutrients, we tend to naturally eat less, even with hungry fat cells. The key here is that nutrient-dense foods, real whole foods, area unit satisfying, whereas processed empty foods, nutrient-poor foods, area unit less satisfying, even if they will contain additional calories. This is in line with a review of analysis on carb consumption in children showing that youngsters United Nations Agency ate additional carbs, ate additional food and were overall hungrier. If you eat tons of carbs, you're hungrier and soak up additional overall food and calories in a very day than if you eat fat. When taken as a full, the science shows us a transparent pattern of proof that carbs cause you to fat, while fat causes you to skinny. Foods like polished rice, potatoes, and sugary beverages promote avoirdupois and related diseases. Fat and calorie-rich foods, like nuts, oily fish, and vegetable oil, and even foods high in saturated fats, promote weight loss and scale back risk of those diseases once you cut out the sugar and refined carbs. Just as we tend to get conditioned to the standard of food we tend to eat, we tend to get want to the quantity, be it barely enough or way an excessive amount of. And much an excessive amount of has become the order of the day. In restaurants and reception, parts have ballooned within the last 50 years, taking our waistlines in conjunction with them. Additionally to uptake supersized parts, our between meal uptake and sweetened beverage consumption have skyrocketed. And it doesn't take abundant to gain the pounds. Consider that even additional 3 bites per day of food might add up to 100 extra calories per day. With 365 days in a very year, that's associate in nursing calculable further 10 pounds per year gained from 3 further bites daily. Even half which will simply make a case for the weight creep that such a big amount of our shoppers report. You'll not notice an additional 5 pounds over the course of a year, however because the years and decades pass, it becomes significant. Besides having a right-away, damaging impact on uncountable Americans' weight and overall health, the portion explosion has distorted our perception of what is traditional, going away several people, perhaps most people, with no thought of what constitutes a meal's or a day's price of food. To counteract habitual gluttony, we need, first and foremost, a reality check, and then a practical setup for clipping. During this chapter we'll target the way to adjust your intake heedfully. As you currently grasp, our immediate environments, constant advertising, and our food histories all influence our daily habits, and eventually our weight and our health. However, a number of the foremost powerful culprits area unit invisible. For tons of individuals, undercurrents of stress and negative feelings, which usually lie outside of conscious awareness, play an oversized half in decisive what, when, and how much we tend to eat. We've all been there. You suspend up from a troublesome call with anger coursing through you or unhappiness advisement you down, and before you recognize it, you've felled not one however 3 brownies. Or you're making an attempt to satisfy a point in time at work and end up munching through a whole bag of Cheetos. On the flip side, once unhappiness or anxiety hits us extremely hard, from a heartrending loss, an awful argument with somebody we tend to love, or pre-presentation jitters, for instance, we often feel unable to eat. As associate in nursing isolated incident, uptake or not eating in response to fret or troublesome emotions is natural. Everybody will it sometimes, and as clinicians we tend to take into account it a neighborhood of traditional uptake behavior, not one thing that interferes with life or harms our health. The matter comes once uptake becomes the first supply of comfort, coping, or pleasure. Why is uptake such a typical response to stress? A part of its chemistry, but on the foremost obvious level, food provides immediate gratification, distracts us from negative thoughts or emotions, doesn't talk back, and is often there. The downside is that the advantages area unit sometimes transient, whereas the negative effects area unit longer lasting in terms of weight and health. Chronic comfort uptake is usually loud by a backlash of guilt or shame, which, as we've emphasized, counteracts healthy modification. And once you interact in comfort uptake repeatedly, it reinforces a pattern of uptake for non-hunger reasons. On prime of all that, when you reflexively address food to feel higher, you aren't doing something to unravel the issue at hand, whether or not that's a strained relationship or monetary bother. As we say oftentimes in our programs, food is incredibly sensible at comforting you within the moment, but not therefore sensible at resolution your issues. We've had some shoppers tape that true statement on their white goods or larder door as a reminder. For tons of individuals, emotional and stress-related uptake could be a prepacked response that looks to just happen before they need an alternative, nearly sort of a reflex. When I'm stressed, I reach for potato chips, the approach my husband reaches for a cigarette, aforesaid Megan, age 39, in one in every of our categories. This comparison makes sense, each in terms of the approach comfort uptake gets encoded into neural pathways and in terms of the drug-like organic chemistry changes that sure foods will prompt. Both consciously and unconsciously, folks use food to manage their moods and manage stress. These patterns lie at the guts of unhealthy uptake habits for tons of people, and it's the facet of weight loss that almost all standard diet plans fail to acknowledge. However, attentiveness provides some way through stress-related uptake. As with all automatic behavior, dynamical patterns starts with awareness, using the skills you've learned to bog down and see what's extremely occurring in your body and in your mind. As you'll ascertain, it's attainable to require apart your reactions and examine the underlying emotions, thoughts, and physical sensations that, bundled along, prompt you to eat. Once you've unbundled a reaction, it loses a number of its power, and new, healthier ways in which to cope emerge. The process we'll guide you through during this chapter is ultimately a decision to appear at, and look after, your whole self.